Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking into something pretty fascinating, I think, and that is insect bioreactors.
Yeah, these are basically, like you said, pretty fascinating, using insects as these tiny little factories to produce all these valuable substances for us.
Yeah, so we've got a ton of different sources on this. We've got some scientific articles, some company websites. We've even got some reports from CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations.
And the range of these sources I think are pretty fascinating too. I've got one here called Overview of Recombinant Protein Expression Systems from Future Fields, and then some articles from industry publications like the Bioprocess Insider, and also a scientific review from Sustainable Food Technology.
So it seems like we're getting perspectives from all angles on this topic. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll walk away understanding how insects could revolutionize industries, from like medicine to even food production.
Yeah, and I think it all starts with a pretty simple problem that we've got. The global demand for things like food and pharmaceuticals is increasing rapidly, but a lot of our traditional production methods, they're struggling to keep up with this demand.
Yeah, I mean, like raising livestock, for example, it takes a lot of land, water, and feed,
Mm.
not to mention the environmental impact.
Right. And even plant-based solutions, while they are a lot more sustainable, they still face limitations as well. That's where the unique advantages of insects as bioreactors come in.
So are they kind of like the underdog of sustainability?
In a way, yeah. I mean, insects, they have a much smaller environmental footprint. They need way less space and water than traditional livestock. And they can even be raised on waste products. So we're talking like organic waste and turning that into valuable products.
I think I remember reading about insect biorefineries where they use insects to break down that waste, and they can create byproducts like fertilizer too.
Yeah, exactly. It's this closed loop system where we try to minimize that waste, and resources are used a lot more efficiently than traditional methods. And it's not just about the sustainability as well. They also have these really fast growth cycles, which means they can produce these large quantities of valuable substances really quickly.
So it's like the speed and sustainability all in one off.
Huh.
So are we talking about any insect in particular,
Yeah.
or are there specific stars in the insect bioreactor lineup?
Yeah, so our sources highlight a few key players with a bunch of unique advantages. One of these is the black soldier fly larvae, or BSFL. They're incredibly efficient at converting that organic waste that we talked about into high-quality protein.
And they do that pretty quickly, right? Like I think I read that they reach full size in just a matter of weeks.
Yeah, 10 to 14 days. That's all it takes. And some companies like Entocycle, they're already using BSFL to produce animal feed and fertilizer, so we can see its real-world application already.
Wow, so something that we might just think of as a pest can actually have such valuable uses.
Yeah, it's the beauty of looking at things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it's not just BSFO either. The sources also talk about Drosophila melanogaster, which is the common fruit fly.
Wait, fruit flies, those tiny things that seem to appear out of nowhere.
The very same. But don't underestimate them. They're really valuable in research because they have short life cycles, really well understood genetics, and many of their genes have counterparts in humans.
So they're like tiny little models for understanding human biology.
Pretty much. And Future Fields uses Drosophila and their Entocycle platform to produce these really complex proteins. And it just highlights how versatile these little creatures can be.
Yeah, it's incredible that something as small as a fruit fly can be a powerhouse for protein production. But our sources also mentioned something about moth chrysalises, right?
Yeah, another fascinating example, Algenex, a biotech company, is exploring using moth chrysalises infected with a specific virus called baculovirus as living bioreactors to produce vaccines.
Hold on, so they're using viruses to turn moth chrysalises into vaccine factories. How does that even work?
Well, it might sound strange, but this technology has the potential to have a huge impact on how quickly and efficiently we can produce these vaccines, potentially making them more accessible globally as well.
Okay, so we've got all these different insect stars, but what are the actual tools and techniques involved in turning them into these protein-producing powerhouses? Like, I feel like we've gone from the who to the how now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the key techniques is called recombinant protein expression, and it's where we genetically modify insects to produce specific proteins that they wouldn't normally make.
So we're kind of giving them a new recipe, but how do you change their genetic makeup? That sounds like a really complicated process.
It is advanced science, but the principle is pretty straightforward. Scientists take genes for the protein they want and they insert them into the insect's DNA. One tool they use is called CRISPR, which is a gene editing technology that lets them make these really precise modifications.
CRISPR, yeah, I've heard of that. I feel like it's revolutionizing so many different fields.
Absolutely. And when it comes to insect bioreactors, it allows for incredibly targeted protein production.
So they can pretty much get the insects to produce any protein they want.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah.
But there are different methods depending on the insect and the protein they want to produce. For example, Future Fields uses a system called UASG-AL4 in Drosophila. It allows for really precise control over when and where the protein is produced. They can turn protein production on and off like a switch.
So it's like having this little tiny biological on and off switch.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And what about the moth chrysalis method? How's that different?
Algenex uses a technique called baculovirus-mediated expression. Remember that virus they use to infect the chrysalises? Well, baculoviruses are really good at delivering large genes into insect cells, making them super effective at producing huge quantities of complex proteins like those needed for vaccines.
So they're using the virus's natural ability to insert those genes and then tweaking it to produce specific proteins. That's pretty clever.
Yeah, it really highlights how scientists are finding innovative ways to use natural processes to our advantage.
Okay, so we've talked about the why of insect bioreactors, the who, the different insects, and the how, the different techniques. But I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Are there downsides or potential risks associated with this technology? It all sounds super promising, but I'm wondering if there's a catch.
Well, that's a great question, and it's super important to consider both the pros and the cons of any new technology, right?
So what are some of those concerns when it comes to insect bioreactors?
Well, one potential issue is allergenicity. Some people are allergic to insects, and we need to be careful that the proteins we get from them don't trigger those reactions.
So like if someone is allergic to bee stings, could they also have a reaction to a medication produced using an insect?
Well, it's not exactly a one-to-one thing, but it's definitely a valid concern. Luckily, though, there's a lot of research going on right now to see if we can reduce that risk. Maybe by engineering hyperallergenic insects or figuring out how to remove allergens from insect products.
So there are some solutions in the works. What about other hurdles besides allergies?
Regulation is another big one. As with any new tech, those clear guidelines for using insect-based products are still in development.
That makes sense. It's a whole new ball game, and regulators got to make sure everything's safe and used responsibly.
Exactly. But the good news is regulatory agencies around the world are already starting to discuss this and figure out how to create frameworks for this technology.
Okay, so allergenicity and regulation, those are two key challenges. But it sounds like there's a lot of work being done to address them. What makes you optimistic about the future of insect bioreactors despite these hurdles?
Well, the potential benefits are just huge. You know, insect bioreactors offer a sustainable and efficient way to make essential substances, addressing those critical needs in food medicine and a whole lot more.
It seems like we're really on the edge of a major change in how we think about production, moving away from those old resource-intensive methods.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the environment either. It could have a positive impact on economies and communities as well, especially in developing countries.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. Insect farming, it's much more accessible than traditional agriculture. It needs less land, less water, and it can be done on a much smaller scale, so it becomes a viable option for people with limited resources.
So it's not just producing more, it's about making sure everyone has access to those resources.
That's a big part of it. And since they can be raised on organic waste, it creates opportunities for waste management and jobs in those communities.
It's like this one solution with a ripple effect of positive impacts.
Right, and the versatility of insect bioreactors means we're not limited to one thing either. You can use them to produce a huge range of products. Food feed, pharmaceuticals, biomaterials, you name it.
So instead of these massive centralized factories, we can have smaller localized production hubs that are more resilient and adaptable.
Exactly. That's a model that's a lot better for a world that's facing more and more uncertainty.
I can see why people are excited about this tech. But what needs to happen to make it go mainstream? To move beyond the labs and projects and become a part of everyday life.
Well, public awareness is a big one. Right now, there's still that ick factor for a lot of people when you talk about insects.
Yeah, I get that.
It's understandable, but it's about changing those perceptions, educating people about the benefits and safety of insect-based products.
Showing people that it's not just a cool science project, but a solution to real-world problems.
Yeah. And then beyond public perception, we also need to find ways to make insect farming more economically viable on a larger scale.
So like bringing down the costs and making the processes more efficient.
Exactly. We need to optimize those rearing techniques, develop automated systems, and find better ways to extract those valuable substances.
Sounds like there's a whole new infrastructure that needs to be built around this industry.
There is. And that brings us to another key element, collaboration. We need researchers, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and investors all working together to create an environment where this technology can thrive.
It's really interdisciplinary.
It is, and it's only by working together and sharing our knowledge that we'll be able to unlock the full potential.
You know, it's funny how much our perceptions can change when we really take the time to learn about something. At the start of this, I was a little skeptical, but now I'm really excited about the possibilities.
I understand. It's often the things that seem strange or unfamiliar at first that have the biggest impact.
So true. So we've covered the why, the who, the how, and even the what's next for insect bioreactors.
We've looked at their potential to change industries, create a more sustainable future, and tackle those global challenges.
But before we wrap things up, let's try to boil this down into a few key takeaways. What are the 3 most important things you want people to remember about insect bioreactors?
Well, I think the biggest one is that insect bioreactors are a sustainable way to produce what we need. They use less stuff, create less waste, and can even help us deal with the waste we already have.
So it's like we're moving away from those old ways of doing things towards something better for the planet.
Exactly. And the second thing is just how versatile they are. It's not just one thing. It's food, feed, medicine, biomaterials. The possibilities seem endless.
It's like a whole new set of tools to solve problems.
And lastly, even though there are challenges like we talked about with allergies and regulations, there's so much research and innovation happening that I'm confident they'll be a big part of our future.
So it's not just a pipe dream. It's something that's actually gaining momentum.
Exactly. And speaking of the future, it's interesting to think about how this tech might change how we see insects in general.
That's a good point. Most people just see them as pests, right? But if we start relying on them for food and medicine, will we start to see them differently?
Yeah, could it lead to us actually appreciating them more for the role they play in the world?
It's a real shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
From something annoying to something we need to take care of.
And that shift in thinking might be one of the most important things to come out of all this. It's not just new products, it's a whole new way of seeing things.
Like this technology is making us rethink all our assumptions.
It is, and that's powerful. It can open us up to all sorts of new possibilities.
It just goes to show that sometimes the answers are right in front of us. We just need to be ready to see them.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
Yeah, we covered the science, the potential, the challenges, even the philosophical stuff.
And hopefully we sparked a little curiosity in there too.
Definitely, because at the end of the day, that's what these deep dives are all about. Exploring new ideas, challenging what we think we know, and understanding the world a little bit better.
So thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of insect bioreactors. We hope you enjoyed the dive.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. That's how we move forward.